My guest today nearly drank himself to death. He's one of the founding members of Guns N' Roses, the rock band who became as well known for their bad behaviour as for their music. For Duff McKagan, that stopped when, as he put it, his pancreas exploded. It prompted him to sober up, go to university, and now, alongside his finance column for Playboy, he has his own wealth management firm. How does a bad boy of rock become a businessman? Duff McKagan, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thanks for having me here.
Now tell us about that moment, and I suppose it was the moment that in a sense saved you when your pancreas just gave up.
Well, yes, I kind of found myself getting closer and closer to insanity as my drinking got worse and the drug intake got worse, and I knew something would give, and I even got to a point, and the reason I sort of wrote this book was so many people have asked me about how did you get so bad, how much did you drink, how much drugs did you do, and if I were to tell you an amount, to a normal person it would just sound like a huge number and it wouldn't mean anything. So I wrote about the kind of journey into my insanity, and fortunately for me, my pancreas did go. I mean, or else I might have just drowned in vomit or something, at some point.
But you nearly died. I mean, did you? I mean,
Yeah,
in fact,
yeah.
you were begging the surgeon to kill you. It was so, the pain was so great.
The reason I say thankfully it happened this way is because it was a real wake-up call. And I was given morphine and Librium for the Librium was for the alcohol withdrawal, but and the morphine was for the pain. But it was a gentle relapse off of alcohol. And I was in the hospital for a couple of weeks, and it gave me time in that hospital to really think about how I got there, and how maybe some solutions coming up, and visions of, I saw things in that hospital. My mom, I'm the last of 8 kids, my mother coming in, she had Parkinson's, her coming in and seeing her youngest son with tubes, running in and out of them. And I was on my deathbed, and she has Parkinson's, and I knew the order of things was absolutely wrong, right then and there. And I thought, if nothing else, I will make it better for my mom, for her, last years here. I will try to rise to the occasion of being a good son to my mom, and that's really what started my whole upward swing.
Okay, but you talk about your pancreas exploding. We should explain that actually what happens inside you when that happens is, I mean, you described it as third-degree burns on your internal organs.
Yeah, what it felt like to me, I mean, it started as just kind of a small burning pain, and I didn't know what it was. I just thought, maybe I had some gas or something, and I was laying in bed, and the pain kind of spread, and I thought, well, the gas is just getting worse, and then it suddenly just went everywhere in my abdomen, and I couldn't move. And what I didn't know was the enzymes that digest your food had spilled out to the outside of my...
And how do you recover from that? I mean, is it you still feeling the effects of that now?
No. That was 17 years ago now.
I know, but I mean, they cut out part of your pancreas.
No, they didn't. So that was the miracle thing about mine. So your pancreas expands. Mine expanded to the size of like an American football. And pancreas is not a large organ, and it expanded and burst. So they did an ultrasound. I was rushed to emergency. My friend found me in my bed. My best friend from childhood came over to the house, found me upstairs, and they took me to emergency. They shot I knew about the warm effects of opiates, and when they had the morphine in me and the pain didn't go away, that's when I knew I was in real trouble. They did an ultrasound. My pancreas was huge. A surgeon came and said, we're going to have to cut out part of your pancreas, and you'll be diabetic or dialysis or whatever. And that's when I asked. I said, just kill me. I mean, the pain was so bad, and the morphine was doing nothing for it. And it was very real at that moment. Everything was very real.
It happened, as you say, because of your drinking, and you say normal people just don't understand. I mean, the actual quantity that you describe you as drinking as being, well, you moved on to wine, 10 bottles of wine a day.
That's when I was trying to taper down, yeah.
And that was, you swapped vodka for wine.
A gallon of vodka, I went from a gallon of vodka, you know, give or take, many probably times give, a gallon of vodka a day to, I'll go to wine. I'll try to taper off. But I was drinking, 10 bottles of wine.
And this is all during the time you're in Guns N' Roses. I mean, we're talking about years of abuse.
Well, yeah, especially there's a good 2.5, 3 years in there that was pretty brutal for me. I was self-medicating panic attacks I'd had since my teenage years, and the thing is, you think, like for me, I thought, well, I'll deal with my panic attacks in a few months when I have time. Well, the band just kept picking up steam, and what I found out, and guess what, folks? Rarely do you get, life gets busy. Rarely do you get that time in a few months to deal with that thing that you're self-medicating right now.
Okay.
And I found that, you know, booze could dampen down a panic attack really quick, and I found that out fairly early.
Let's go back, because 1986, and you describe this in your book, It's So Easy and Other Lies, which is basically, I mean, it's an autobiography, but you describe how one year, 1986, the band members of Guns N' Roses are in, what, a one-room rented flat, just really no money.
Yeah.
They're pretty abysmal life. You're ransacking some of the girls who are sleeping with the guys. You're ransacking their handbags to take money. Some of you guys are selling drugs. It's a pretty low life for you. And yet within a year of that, you have this best-selling debut album of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, that change over a year must have been phenomenal.
There is no how-to video or how-to manual for what happens in your life when a record like our first record finally did take off. We all played in bands before Guns N' Roses. We were used to doing like little punk rock tours and living sort of hand to mouth. You know, it wasn't that abysmal to us. We were just living, and we had our band, and we believed in our band, and it was exciting. We were young men, and we were 20 years old, barely men, you know, barely. Not even men, really. But we believed in our band, and we finally got a record deal, and we made the record we wanted to make, and we toured, and about a year later, that record took off, and the change was quite amazing.
Well, let's have a reminder of one of the songs from that first album.
Okay.
Sweet Child of Mine, which was released actually in 1988, and that's at a time when you're hiring private planes, 727s, for your tours.
Not yet. We just we eventually did. 1988, when that single came out, Sweet Child, was finally when the record took off. That single went to #1 in America, and we were still living in a tour bus, making $100 a week, and then the record started really selling, and we came off of that tour, and I remember my first check, the first big check that I got was $80,000, and it might as well have been $1 billion, because I didn't know, and nor did my family that I grew up in, you know anything about money. So I couldn't go to one of my older brothers and sisters and ask them, what do I do with 80 grand? And what's a stock, and what's a bond, and what's, you know, savings account, really? What's a mortgage? What's in a mortgage? What's a loan? I didn't know any of this stuff. So, but getting that 80 grand, you know, it was like just a windfall. Of course, you know, that was the beginning of a lot more checks to come.
Okay, I mean, they were phenomenally successful. I wonder when you hear that Sweet Child of Mine now, and you think back to that time, How do you feel about it?
Well, I hear that song a lot. That song's played a lot. So I don't spend a lot of time in my past, and I think going forward, you know, my life's always just going forward, and now I have daughters that are growing. They're 11 and 14. I write 2 columns a week, and I have a business, and I have a band that tours. So everything's so much in the present, and sitting down to write the stories that became this book. So the first time I really took some time and evaluated my thing, my life, how I got to that hospital bed and how I got out, and what happened to me with Guns N' Roses and what happened to me with Velvet Revolver, and I think we have these rear view mirrors in life, at least what I discovered. All the bad stuff that happened, you know, you just kind of peripherally think it's somebody else. It was always that other guy's fault, and all the good stuff you had everything to do with. As I was writing this book, I found that maybe I had something to do with some of the bad stuff too. And
some of that bad stuff, I mean, it's not just the drinking. It's also, there was also stuff that you were involved in, and one of the charges that was levelled against the band was a charge of misogyny, partly because of the first album cover, which was which was a picture.
Robert Williams.
Yeah, a picture of a robot standing over an assaulted woman, and she's exposed. Her knickers around her calves, and you were criticised for that, but also for the lyrics of "It's So Easy," which you've picked up with the title for your book. I mean, there's one line in it: "Turn around, bitch, I got a use for you." I mean, when you look back at some of the stuff that you did then, are you guilty of misogyny?
I wrote those lyrics for that song, so I mean, you can come straight. It was very much a tongue-in-cheek song, not misogynistic in any way.
How do you explain it to your daughters? Because you've got teenage daughters now.
Well, there's a spirit of rock and roll that is, to me, far and above, misogyny or homophobia or any of those things. There's just like this primal sex and rock and roll are just hand in hand, and how would I explain it to my daughters? But
don't you think it's, I mean, you make the point when you're writing this book that you're responsible for some of the stuff. Isn't that spirit of rock and roll responsible and influencing people in the way that they see things?
I think I give humans a lot more credit than if something that I write, a song or a lyric or anything, if it influences them in a bad way, which I rarely ever hear about, 99.99% of the times people will come up to me and say, "Your music changed my life." It's always a positive thing. There's maybe 1 or 2 instances, and it's usually something that happened at a concert, whether it was people pushing forward and somebody falling in the mud and drowning. That's way more brutal than me. To me,
I mean, you had two fans in 1988 were crushed to death at one of your concerts. But beyond that, I mean, as well as that, there was the lifestyle that you were leading. I mean, the influence you must have had on people, because part of this, and you said it fed into, we couldn't have made the music if it weren't in part for what you were doing. I mean, I wonder what
do you mean?
Well, there was one point at which you talked about we had to go out on the edge to get the songs we got.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, you have to live. You can't just write a song and not... To me, for honest rock and roll, you can't imagine, especially the subjects we're talking about, cops and crime, especially the first record. It's all about the life that we were leading.
So the drink and the drugs were essential to the rock music?
To our songs that... I'm not saying they're essential to rock music, period. They were essential to that record that we made in 1986 that came out in 87.
And it was a record that spoke to an awful lot of people. And I wonder if you think if it influenced them.
I think we were just being honest about what was going on around us. I think that's why it spoke to so many, because what was on radio at that time in rock music was just sort of a lie. It was sprinkled up pop rock music, and it wasn't speaking to anybody. It was speaking to little girls who were going to the mall And there was a whole rest of us who were out there that were living this real life. And if you remember, there was a recession that was in the early 80s, and there was all these things that people my age lived through. And finally, we were this band. There was a lot of other bands like us that were speaking the truth. There was great punk rock bands and so on and so forth that were speaking the truth. And it wasn't like we were making a political statement or anything close to it. We just wrote honest songs about stuff we were going through. That it spoke to a lot of other people wasn't, were we trying to speak to a lot? We didn't think 10 people would buy our record. But a lot more than that bought our record. You know, I didn't think...
When you look at the price for that, there was a moment, and you describe it in 1991, where you find yourself in your walk-in closet with a gun,
Yeah.
basically ready to follow the guy you knew, Kurt Cobain, a few years before.
Yeah. Well, we're mixing up a few different things. I mean, really, my addictions and so on and so forth had... Guns N' Roses made my life in a band that got huge. Didn't give me time to address my panic disorder, which was really the root of my whole drinking and self-medicating. So I don't want to confuse or certainly not blame Guns N' Roses or rock and roll or anything that silly for my addiction. My addiction is my addiction. It was something I had to come to terms with outside of rock and roll.
So you would have had the same addictions irrespective of the band and the success?
Who knows? The only life I know is the one I lived. You know, I know addicts, a lot of them, and in recovery that had wholly different experiences in life than I did. Completely different. Some that were stockbrokers, and some that were very successful and still are, and some that aren't. They were never successful, and who knows where addiction really comes from.
But it was fascinating to read the account of how you got out of it, because you know the conventional route is via rehab, and you didn't do that. I mean, it was mountain biking in a sense that first saved you.
Yeah.
And that was what I mean. You shut yourself off in LA in your house on your own, and you just rode a bike.
Yeah.
And became obsessional about it.
Well, I rode my bike because I mean, for the first few months I still had the shakes, and so riding the bike was the only thing. I didn't know anybody sober, so I didn't know anybody in those fellowships, those rooms we know about. That I know about now, but I just didn't know anybody there. So all I knew was I had this bike, and I rode it, and I got this sort of, you know, first it was like self-flagellation, like you see the parades and the Catholic parades. I felt like I was that guy going up the hills, like kind of beating myself up a bit for, you know, failing my mom, some of my friends, and those types of things, my family, and but it also started to make me feel whole. I was drinking water. I was doing I didn't drink water for like 10 years, literally, and I started eating food as fuel, like healthy food, and reading books. I watched a Ken Burns documentary on the Civil War and got fascinated and started reading about the Civil War, and I started reading.
And you also walked down into your basement and came across some financial statements which you just didn't understand and were too embarrassed to ask somebody. And that, in a way, was a sort of turning point for you, because that set you off on this quest to understand finance, which is, in large part, your life now.
It is. It is a part of my life. So yeah, I found these financial statements in my basement, and I was 30 years old. I was sober. Yes, and I didn't know what a stock or a bond was. I was too embarrassed to ask anybody else, really, and I didn't trust a lot of people in my industry, and I didn't have anybody to really go to. So I went to school. I went and got into this class at a community college, in which it covered financial statements. And so I could take the information I got at class one night and come straight home. And I would be in class like, oh, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And eventually, in that first class, I brought a financial statement. I blacked out the numbers, and I brought it to my professor. And I said, I'm just having a problem with these. And he goes, well, they are sort of misleading. These aren't like classic financial statements. They're a little misleading. We weren't blatantly ripped off, but there was commissions and things taken off places that I would never allow to happen now. But as I matriculated through school, I got very interested in academia. Got into a school eventually that I wanted to, Seattle U. But I even before, I mean, I didn't graduate high school. So getting into Seattle U, I had to jump through a bunch of academic hoops, like community college, junior college, taking math, taking things to get myself to the level to get in there.
Such that you're in a situation where your first Playboy column, because they approach you and you've got this Duffonomics in Playboy, and you say, you refer to my love of academia. Don't laugh. You love it.
Yeah, I really do. I hope to continue at some point. And you know, I've been in the UK for the last couple of weeks, and I love to work out, as we were talking. And I was in Oxford the other day, and some guy tells me there's a gym down the street. I saw a guy in gym clothes, and I said, where's the gym? And he said, it's down the street. And it was the Oxford gym, Oxford University gym, and there I am on the campus working out in the gym. And I just love those places of higher learning. But my point is, I was in school taking math. I wasn't even in business school yet, and I started getting calls from my peers, fellow musicians, guys who were in my shoes, you know, who had made money, didn't know what it was, what to do with it. You don't want to make money in your 20s and 30s and be broke at 45 because you didn't know how money worked. And
also because, as you've said, the whole industry is set up for managers. They're not going to say to their rock bands, you've only got 3 years of productive life.
What manager's going to say that to their artists? Because that artist will say, oh yeah, I've only got 3 years. Well, I'll find the manager who tells me I have 10 or 20. Right. So managers will just kind of shy away from that.
You sort of referred to your luck. You're in a situation now where you're healthy, you're clean, you turned your life around. There are others, people like Amy Winehouse, who didn't. Is there any way that somebody can be protected from and be saved, in a sense, stop what happened to her?
No, you can't save anybody that's in a place that, you know, a person who doesn't want to help themselves. There's nothing you can do for them. And anybody that was around somebody like Amy Winehouse who maybe feels guilty or whatever at this point, or us placing blame on a manager or whoever, well, you shouldn't have allowed her to do that. She's going to do it. Those people,
But you yourself, when you describe your own managers, you say if someone entrusted with the care of the band had actually cared about the health of any of us, Guns would have been pulled off the road and put into therapy years ago.
A lot of my book, I see the humor in the story too. So when you read the words, excuse me, yeah, if a dialogue would have been started, perhaps, about, hey guys,
but they're after the gold.
What's that?
You use the expression gold. They're after the gold. They're interested in the gold.
We're making money right then, and there's a whole line of gigs coming up that's going to make those managers a lot more money. They're a little less apt to maybe say, let's pull it off, let's pull it back, get you guys, maybe you guys can talk about getting healthy, Duff,
right.
You know.
So is there any chance that Guns N' Roses could, I mean, you've been nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, any chance of a reunion?
Is there any chance? There's always a chance of anything in this life. There's a chance my daughter might think I'm not the nerdy dad that she thinks I am right now. In a year, she might think, my dad's cool. So who knows? You know, I know in this life you don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen next month in my life. So
Duff McKagan, thank you for coming on
Okay,
HARDtalk.
cool. Thanks. That was easy.